Heaven Official's Blessing. Guan by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 10. Windmaster in White, bellowing sandstorms from nowhere. Xielian unconsciously stepped forward to stand in front of Sanlang. I know better than anyone where my place is, Xielian replied. Then how do you still stand next to him? Fu Yao shouted. Because if I stand next to him, the snakes won't come, Xielian answered earnestly. Hearing the response, Sanlang and laughed out loud. Fu Yao grew grimmer. Grimmer and grimmer. His face suddenly turned completely black. It wasn't just his face, but Xielian's entire view that dimmed into darkness. The screen of flames and the ring of fire created by Fu Yao were suddenly completely extinguished. Within the darkness, Xielian heard Sanlang snicker and say, useless trash. Then he felt Sanlang grip his shoulders to pull him close. Soon after, Xielian heard a sudden downpour of endless battering above them, like a thunderstorm hitting an umbrella. Needless to say, now that the defense barrier was gone, the snake deluge came pouring down like mad. The open umbrella was blocking the downpour, and Xielian could smell the thick, foul stench of blood. He was about to fight, but Sanlang stopped him. Don't move. No lowlives will dare approach. His tone was confident. The first sentence was soft and gentle, the second arrogant. Xielian wasn't worried, but hearing Fu Yao's angry roars across the pit, sounding like he was getting bombarded by snakes, he called out, Sanlang. No, Sanlang replied instantly. Xielian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How did you know what I was going to say? Don't worry so much. He can't die, Sanlang said. Just then, another roar came from ahead of them in the pit. Bai Yue, if you want me to die, then have them bite me and kill me in one go. What the hell is this? It's not me, Bai Yue cried. It seemed that Keimo had awoken after the punch, discovered himself submerged in countless snakes, and believed it to be Bai Yue's doing. Fu Yao, can you light another fire? Do it again, Xielian shouted. Fu Yao gritted his teeth. That lad next to you is restricting my powers. I can't light anything. Xielian felt dread, and Sanlang said, It's not me. I know it's not you, Xielian said, but that's precisely what's wrong. Both Bai Yue and Keimo are bound by the immortal binding rope, so they can't use their powers. My powers are depleted, and if you're not restricting anyone, it means there's a sixth person in this pit. Have you lost your mind? Fu Yao demanded. What sixth person? No one else came down. Who's there? Bai Yue suddenly said. Bai Yue, what's happening? Is someone over there? Xielian asked. Someone... Bai Yue's voice cut off. Whether her mouth was sealed shut or she lost consciousness, they didn't know. Xielian called out again. Bai Yue? Fu Yao was still fighting snakes, and brief flashes of white blasted in waves in the darkness. Be careful, she might be tricking you. Not necessarily, Xielian shouted. I'm going to save her first. Xielian was about to run into the snake deluge when he heard Sanlang's voice next to his ear. All right. Xielian felt the hand gripping on his shoulders tighten, and in a flash, they were dashing forward. Xielian realized in awe that the youth was advancing and attacking at the same time, but with an umbrella in one hand and him on the other, in darkness, silver shimmers flashed about once more, clanking and clinking, when suddenly the sharp sound of two swords clashing rang in everyone's ears. Oh, Sanlang said. There really is a sixth person. Interesting. Xielian had no idea how Sanlang was controlling the weapon, or what kind of weapon it was, but whatever it was, it most certainly did crash head to head into another. His opponent remained silent, and Xielian could only hear metal scraping metal as the fight intensified. From time to time, there would be sparks flashing in the dark, but each flash was so short-lived, it was hard to see the other's face. Xielian listened to the fight while calling out, Bai Yue, are you still conscious? Can you respond? No one responded. Fu Yao exclaimed, Maybe the one fighting now is her. No, that's definitely not Bai Yue, Xielian said. While both times were in the dark, when Sun Lung fought Mo, he was light-footed and messing about, toying with the man. This fight, however, Xielian could tell Sun Lung was taking more seriously. The opponent was extremely skilled in martial arts and weaponry. Bai Yue was small and weak. From the look of her limbs alone, it was obvious her strength and weaponry were not her forte. So it was impossible for her to be the one fighting Sun Lung. But who was the sixth person? When did they appear? Fu Yao griped. Someone who would betray her own country is no different from Sun Ji. Why on earth do you still believe in her? Fu Yao, can you not be so irritated all of a sudden? Xielian said. Wait, what did you just say? Fu Yao struck out another palm and blew away a bunch of snakes. I said, why on earth would you believe her? It's like you believe in the lad next to you. No, not that. You said Sun Ji. You mentioned Sun Ji's name, didn't you? Yeah, so what? She's completely irrelevant. Xielian, however, held his breath. A moment later, he called out, Stop fighting. There's no more need to hide. I know who you are. The sound of blades clashing never halted. The other was unmoved, but Xielian wasn't worried. Do you think I was bluffing when I said I already know who you are? General Pei Jr.? Who are you talking to? Fu Yao was dumbstruck. General Pei Jr.? Don't be crazy. Who do you think he is? If he descended, everyone would know. You're very right, Xielian said. But what if it wasn't his true self that descended? In the darkness, the fighting weapons faltered for a split second, then picked up anew. Xielian continued. It took me too long to figure this out. I should have known from the beginning. I knew that for those close to 200 years, there was something causing havoc, but none other than the heavenly official. But none of the heavenly officials cared, and no one dared to speak of it. So there had to be someone no one wanted to offend, keeping this scandal under wraps. Since I wasn't familiar with many of the officials, I didn't dare boldly pin this on anyone and never tried to boldly deduce which heavenly official it could be. It was Fu Yao's mention of Sun Ji that reminded him. It wasn't hard to connect the subject of Sun Ji to the two generals Pei and the North. And the North was their territory. Fu Yao once said in passing that prior to his ascension, General Pei Jr. slaughtered a city. Which city? Could very well be the kingdom of Bai Yue. The upper court wouldn't bat an eyelash at something like this. Everyone needed to spill some blood if they wanted to do great things. But slaughtering a city wasn't anything glorious. He said it after all. If the story spread too far, it would affect the number of new believers. So of course there would be some cover-ups after Ascension. Thus, even if everyone knew something of the sort happened, they probably didn't know the details, or didn't care to know. Besides, unless someone possessed some sort of deep grudge, who would have the time or motivation to dig up his past and offend the support behind his back? Xielian spoke slowly. That mud-face said there was someone among us who visited the city 50 or 60 years ago. At first I thought he was lying to deceive us into getting closer, but his words may very well have been true. Before, in that group of people, the one I was most suspicious of was you. The caravan followed you, and you could take them anywhere. I had never seen a single scorpion snakes in the years I lived near Bai Yue, and now, while randomly seeking shelter from a sandstorm, they just happened to show up. I asked you to come search for the Xiangyue fern with us, but just before we left, you gave the directions to the ruins to the others so they could follow in our footsteps, if they could no longer sit still. Earlier on top of the walls, I already said if anything were to happen, I would go forward first. You, who was always calm, suddenly jumped and died a meaningless death. Xielian continued after a pause. Your actions were strange and illogical at every turn. That it took me until now to realize who you are is too late. Isn't that right, General Pei Jr.? Or should I use your current name, Axiao? Abruptly, everything became still. It was a moment before a frigid voice spoke. Did you not suspect that Mudface might have been talking about the red-clad head boy next to you? Just as he spoke, a stream of flames suddenly lit up across the sinner's pit. Under the light, two bloody silhouettes were revealed. One was Sunlung, dressed in red, standing properly with his weapon already tucked away. The other was a plainly clothed young man with a sword tightly in hand, still brandished at the ready. The plain-clothed young man was covered in blood, looking like he was also dressed in red. His expression was cold and reserved. He was carrying someone over his shoulders. It was indeed Axiao. To be fair, whether it was General Pei Jr. himself or Axiao, that composed, calm, and collected aura never changed. Only Cillian never thought in that direction, so he hadn't connected the two until now. The one he was carrying on his shoulders was Bai Yue. It seemed he had called forth the snakes in order to steal her away during the chaos. Now that his identity was revealed, he no longer needed to create havoc, and the snake deluge ceased its bombardment. He sheathed his sword and gently laid Bai Yue on the ground. On the side, Kamo was shocked. Who are you? Didn't you fall to your death? Hajiao didn't spare a look at Kamo, instead staring intently at Sunlung. Kamo, you really haven't changed in hundreds of years, he said simply in the Bai Yue tongue. Perhaps this madly calm tone was overly familiar. Kamo's face immediately scrunched up in rage. It's you, Pei Shu! If not for the immortal binding rope solidly tying him down, Kamo would have lunged at him and fought to the death. General Pei Jr., Cillian said. The scorpion snakes listened to more than one command, didn't they? You controlled all the snakes that Bai Yue said no longer obeyed her, and you took them out to do harm, correct? It was me. Did Bai Yue teach you how to control the scorpion snakes? Cillian questioned. She didn't, Pei Shu said, but I easily learned for myself how she does it. General Pei Jr. is exceedingly intelligent after all, Cillian commented. After a pause, he then asked, When did you two meet? How did you two meet? Pei Shu, however, gave him a look. General Hua? Cillian was puzzled. Why are you calling me by that title, too? Pei Shu asked quietly. Do you not recognize me, General Hua? Now Cillian did. The beginning was kind of blurry. Bai Yue was bullied and ignored by other Bai Yue children when she was younger, and only a young boy of Yong'an would sometimes pay attention to her. Like Bai Yue, that boy didn't talk very much. Quite a number of children living on the border were from military families, and may also enlist in the army when they grow older. Could it be... It's you? Jialian was surprised. I can't believe it took me this long to realize it was you. Pei Shu nodded. It's me. I've only just recognized the general, too. No wonder. So it turned out that Bai Yue and the enemy general had already known each other since childhood. Did Bai Yue really heed your order to open the city gates? Cillian asked. On the other side, Kamo spat and yelled, Despicable! Pei Shu, untie these ropes! Let me fight him to the death! Pei Shu said coldly, First of all, we already had that battle to the death 200 years ago, and you lost. Second of all, how am I despicable? Kamo exclaimed, Could we have lost if you two hadn't colluded? Kamo, don't deny it, Pei Shu said. Even though I only had a troop of 2,000, for me breaking through the city gates was only a matter of time. Cillian couldn't help but interrupt. Wait a sec. You only had 2,000 under you and you were sent to invade a country? Why was that? Isn't that no different from sending you to your death? Were you perhaps even more elbowed out of the army than I was? Pei Shu stopped talking. It seemed Cillian had hit it on the head. Cillian then asked, If you knew it was a sure win, why did you have Bai Yue open the city gates? Because I needed to slaughter the city, Peisu replied. What do you mean? Xielian asked. Since you were already going to win, why did you have to slaughter the city? It couldn't be his hobby. It's precisely because victory was at hand that we had to wipe out the city, Peisu said. And it had to be as soon as possible, immediately, leaving no one behind. That leaving no one behind sounded ghastly. Xielian pushed. And the reason was? Peisu answered. On the night before the invasion, many of the leaders of the Banyue major clans gathered for a meeting to decide on a secret plot. What plot? The people of Banyue were fierce in nature and hated Yong'an to the core, Peisu said. Even knowing they were about to be defeated, they wouldn't submit. So the entire population of the kingdom, the young and the old, the women and men, all banded together to assemble something. What was that something? Xielian could guess, but he wasn't sure. The word came out of Peisu's mouth and confirmed his suspicions. Explosives. Peisu slowly enunciated the word. They decided that if the kingdom was to fall, the citizens would carry explosives on their bodies, escape to Yong'an, mix into large crowded areas, and blow themselves up to cause riots. Meaning if they had to die, they would drag as many Yong'an people down with them as they could. If the kingdom should fall, then they would terrorize the country that brought their downfall. Which was why they had to be annihilated before the civilians had time to flee. Xielian instantly turned to Keimo, roughly summarized for him in the Banyue language, and asked, Is this true? Keimo looked dauntless and made no attempt to conceal the facts. It's true! Sanlong quirked his eyebrow at this and commented, How vile. He said those words in the Banyue tongue, though whether it was intentional was unknown. Keimo replied angrily, Vile? What right do you have to call us vile? If it wasn't for your assaults, we wouldn't have been forced to make that move. You ruined us, so we sought revenge. How is that wrong? Peisu responded, Really now? How about we lay everything out in the open then? How many times did Banyue citizens start riots near the border? How many caravans and travelers were going to the west regions from Yong'an and were ambushed by Banyue? You intentionally sheltered the bandits that terrorized Yong'an and killed our soldiers sent to exterminate them under the pretense of illegal border crossing. How is that not vile? Peisu spoke unhurriedly, and his tone was calm, but each word was sharp like a knife. Keimo argued. But it's because you forcibly occupied our land first that we had no choice but to retaliate. The border had always been ambiguous, so how can you say we forcibly occupied your land? Peisu countered. The lines were clearly drawn. It was you who didn't keep the agreements. The lines were drawn by Banyue, and Yong'an never agreed to them. Your so-called drawn border was nothing but pushing us into the desert and keeping the oasis all for yourselves. How ridiculous. Keimo countered furiously. The oasis was always ours. Our forefathers, generation after generation. The Banyue always lived in the oasis. Both sides had their stories. Just listening to them argue befuddled Xielian. This hostility was making him remember how badly he got beaten up, stuck between both sides, and he could feel the pain on his face resurface. Peisu seemed to have enough of quarreling with Keimo, and he turned to Xielian. So you see, there are many things in the world that simply cannot be clearly defined or resolved. You can only fight. Xielian sighed. I'll agree to the first part. Sanlong, on the other hand, said, I'll agree to the second part. Keimo's anger was somewhat curbed, and he suddenly said, The majority of Yong'an people were shameless, but you are the most shameless I'd ever met. Peisu, you're a cold-hearted man. You didn't kill us for your country, and it wasn't to save your people. Peisu fell silent at this. Keimo continued. You are the son of an exiled man, looked down on by all. You only wanted to secure your footing in the Yang'an army and keep climbing up. So you had to win the battle. So sad that Ban Yue still thought you were good and let you use her, and betrayed us for the likes of you. But isn't General Pei Jr. a descendant of General Pei? Xielian wondered. To have such a renowned ancestor watching over him, how could he have fallen so astray? He's not a direct descendant of General Pei, Sunlung said. He's from however many branches out. So that was it. That meant that, had he not ascended, he probably would have had any chance of being blessed by the old He probably wouldn't have had any chance of being blessed by the old ancestors. Pei Si said quietly, Ban Yue had always been my subordinate and only infiltrated the kingdom of Ban Yue under my command. She is from both Baiyue and Yong'an. Once she chose her side, she had to be loyal to that side, and there was no such thing as betrayal. The Baiyue people were evil. I have no regrets about killing them. Suddenly, a voice came from above. No regrets about killing. Well said. Well, if you'd say... Will you say the same about all the travelers who you missed into this pass and who lost their lives in this pit? That voice had come from above everyone's heads, and Xielian instantly looked up. Which great master is here among us? There wasn't a response, but a sudden strange noise. It was like the billowing of wild winds, and when that sound finally came near, Xielian could finally say with certainty, it was definitely the bellowing of wild winds. This abrupt gale entered the sinner's pit from above, swept all the way to the bottom, and rolled everyone into the air. Xielian immediately grabbed for Sunlung, who was the closest to him, and cried, Watch out! Sunlung caught him too, face unchanging. Xielian only felt a spinning whirl, and their bodies swiftly rising. And after a pause, they started plunging down. Xielian quickly tossed out Rue and coaxed in the middle of the chaos. All right. Everything's over. Hurry. My good Rue, come out and give us a hand. After a couple of pets, Rue finally flew out. However, with nothing in the air to grab onto in the sitter's pit below, Rue flew around once and shrank back. Feeling resigned, Xielian could only adjust his form for landing. If this was like the previous incidents, he would have cratered headfirst 3 feet into the ground. But this time, just before they hit the ground, Sunlung reached out and gave him a pull, and he actually landed with his feet flat on the ground. When his boots firmly touched down, he was even a little incredulous. But the feeling went away very quickly when a black-clad silhouette came stumbling before him. Xielian saw who it was and called out in delight. Nanfeng. It was Nanfeng indeed, but a disheveled Nanfeng. It looked as if he were rolled in dirt a dozen times before getting thrown into a rambunctious den of beasts to spend the night. His clothes were tattered and frayed, unkempt to the mask. Hearing Xielian's call, he only waved and quietly wiped at his face, unable to even speak. Xielian helped him to his feet. What happened? Did those 2 ladies beat you up? Before he finished, 2 figures appeared behind Nanfeng and walked over. One of them was the female cultivator in white, with a whisk in her arm, and she greeted Xielian cheerfully. How do you do, Your Royal Highness? Although Xielian didn't know who this was, proper etiquette must still be followed. But he didn't know how to address her, so he could only smile back and wave. Greetings, fellow cultivator. The lady in black standing to the side glanced coldly at Xielian, but didn't seem to care about him. When her eyes moved to Sanlung, however, she seemed to think he was a dubious figure and stopped for a moment. The gusts earlier had blown everyone out of the pit, and the 2 ladies walked past Xielian, heading straight for Pei Si. He saw them approach and didn't appear surprised. After all, he had already seen them in town when he was still playing the part of Aziao. He knelt where he was, bowed his head to the lady cultivator in white, and greeted her quietly. Lord Windmaster. Xielian was stunned hearing those words. And here he thought she was some menacing ghost or monster. Who knew she was actually a heavenly official? And she was the Windmaster, the one who was giving out 10,000 merits in one go at the communication array. But now that he thought about it in detail, there wasn't anything out of place. At the time, she had said something along the lines of, "Now where did they go? Do I have to dig them out and kill them all one by one?" And made him think she was after them. In reality, this they might not have been their group. She could have meant the Bayue soldiers. Cielian thought he was alone in this investigation, and naturally thought the lady cultivators were strange and wicked. Cielian couldn't help but feel a nameless reverence toward a heavenly official who could easily hand out 10,000 merits. He turned to Nanfeng. "Why didn't you tell me this was the Windmaster sooner? And here I thought she might be some sort of snake or scorpion spirit. Such impropriety." Nanfeng's expression darkened. "I didn't know it was the Windmaster. I'd never seen the Windmaster like this before. The Windmaster has always been... Never mind." Cielian understood. This was probably a fake appearance the Lord Windmaster donned, so he didn't dig into it. He asked, "Why did the Windmaster come to Bayue Pass?" "To help out," Nanfeng said. "When we saw them strolling in the streets earlier, they were actually looking for those Bayue soldiers." Cielian recalled now of the first time he asked about Bayue Pass in the communication array. In the midst of all that awkward silence, it was the Windmaster's sudden release of 10,000 merits that distracted everyone. The Windmaster had probably taken notice of his query then. As Cielian mused, the Windmaster crouched down in front of Peixiu. "Little Pei, I've heard everything, you know." Peixiu hung his head. The Windmaster demanded, "Do you admit that for the past 200 years, you are the one who lured all those travelers into the ancient kingdom of Vanue?" Since he was already caught, Peixiu didn't argue and only replied solemnly, "It was me." "Why?" the Windmaster demanded. After a pause, Peixiu asked, "Lord Windmaster has long been suspicious. Can you not guess why?" Is it only because these souls of the dead are iron proof of the blood on your hands while you are human, and would become obstacles to your climbing higher in the future?" the Windmaster asked. Peixiu neither agreed nor disagreed. Cielian, who was listening from the side, couldn't help but ask, "If anything, why didn't you just kill them directly? Why instead was your method feeding them the living to appease their resentment? How is that different from quenching the thirst of one by using another's flesh and blood?" Sunlong replied, "He couldn't." That was true too. In the upper court, every move by a heavenly official like Peixiu was watched intently by countless eyes. There were many things that he couldn't do directly, and he couldn't use his true form to come down openly and kill off the resentful spirits of these soldiers, and he couldn't send troops to annihilate them either. This was already a concealed affair, so if there was too much of a stir, wouldn't it attract everyone's gaze? At most, he could only send a clone like Axiao down quietly. Using the scorpion snakes that Bayue was a known expert in manipulating to go out and cause harm, attracting passerby to feed to the resentful spirits and disperse their resentment. It was no doubt murder by proxy. "Your General Pei wouldn't have ever done something like this," the Windmaster said. "This time, I'm afraid you've crossed the line." The fact that he would release a clone to cause havoc at the Bayue Pass for almost 200 years and lure in numerous passerby down the wrong path and into the ruins to die in the mouths of Bayue soldiers, for a heavenly issue, this was no small issue whatsoever. Peixiu had his head bowed lowly. "This junior knows." The Windmaster swept her whisk. "As long as you understand, reflect on yourself and think on it. We'll talk in the heavens." "I understand," Peixiu said quietly. Having finished talking with Peixiu, the Windmaster stuffed the whisk back into the collar of her robe and smiled at Cielian. "Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince, I've heard so much about you." To Cielian, "Heard so much about you" really wasn't a compliment, but nonetheless, it was just meaningless pleasantries, so he smiled back. "I'm sure it's nothing. I've heard much about you as well, Lord Windmaster." "Sorry about before, by the way," the Windmaster said. Xialian paused. Before? What happened before? Didn't you all run into a windstorm in the desert? Thinking back, Xialian could almost taste mouthfuls of sand. He replied, Yes. I started that, the Windmaster said. The Windmaster explained, that windstorm was meant to stop you all from going near the kingdom of Baiyu. But not only did you get blown away, you went around and ended up in Baiyu anyways. The longer Xialian listened, the more he felt that something wasn't right. First, she used the windstorm to stop them from getting to Baiyu Pass, and now the whole thing was suddenly out in the open. What did it mean? Xialian didn't respond, biding his time to see what the other would say. The Windmaster continued. But in regards to this whole deal, it would be best if your highness got no further involved. Xialian stole a look at Bai Yue, curled up on the ground, and felt his dread rise. He was already worried that if the scandal were to reach the upper court, the officials could easily muck up the truth, add strokes where they shouldn't, and have Bai Yue take all the blame where little Pei ran off scot-free. With Windmaster's sudden appearance, telling him not to get further involved, didn't this cement they would protect little Pei? Without any change in expression, Xialian stepped forward to stand in front of Bai Yue, hiding her behind him, and said warmly, But I'm already further involved, so telling me to leave now is fairly pointless, no? The Windmaster flashed a smile. Don't worry, you can take the state preceptor of Bai Yue away with you. Now that was unexpected. Xialian was slightly taken aback, and the Windmaster continued. While you were all in the pit, we heard everything from up here. Although the state preceptor has turned it into a wrath, when I roamed the city, I saw she had drawn an array to trap the Bayou soldiers and released all the captured mortals. She didn't hurt anyone and even saved people. The only ones I'm taking are General Pei Jr. and Keimo. If you don't have to worry about me placing any undue blame on anyone. Xialian relaxed. Much ashamed. I was suspicious. It's normal to worry, the Windmaster said. There's certainly an unpleasant culture in the upper court, after all. The lady in black looked as if she couldn't stay in for a moment longer, and spoke up. Are you done? If you're done, let's go. The Windmaster rebuked. What's the rush? The more you rush, the more I want to talk. Still, she turned her head and smiled, taking out a folding fan from her waist. Your Royal Highness, if there's nothing else, we'll see you in the upper court? Xialian nodded, and the Windmaster opened her fan. On the fan was the word wind, feng, on a slant, and 3 inclined lines, like wind on the back. That had to be the Windmaster's spiritual device. She fanned forward 3 times and backwards 3 times. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew from out of nowhere. The wind drew the dust and sand, and Xialian raised his sleeve to block the debris. When the wind died down, the 2 ladies, Pei Xiu and Keimo, had all disappeared, leaving behind only Xialian, Sanlang, Nanfeng, and the curled-up Bai Yue on the ground. Xialian dropped his sleeve, still a little dazed. What just happened? Sanlang casually strolled over. A pretty good thing. Xialian looked at him. Is it? Yeah. The Windmaster was trying to help you by telling you not to get involved. Nanfeng walked over too. That's right. You've dug too deep into this business already. The only thing left to do is file a complaint to the Heavenly Emperor. Don't get yourself any more involved. Xialian got it. Is it because of General Pei? Correct, Nanfeng said. This time you have thoroughly offended him. Xialian laughed. I knew I was going to offend someone one of these days. I guess it doesn't matter who. Nanfeng furrowed his brows. Don't think I'm joking. After the Palace of Divine Might, the next most powerful martial palace is Mingguang. General Pei thinks very highly of little Pei and has long been trying to oust Chen Yixuan. He's gonna come knocking looking for trouble. Chen Yixuan is the martial god that rules the West, right? Xialian asked. That's the one. Nanfeng replied. Chen Yixuan is also a new official. He ascended around the same time as Pei Xiu. He's young and a little, Ooh, but very powerful. General Pei intended for Pei Su to take over all the devotees of the West, and he's done well for himself, especially these past few years. Now, with you dragging this scandal out into the open, it's not looking good for Pei Su. Maybe you'll even be banished. If he gets banished, your luck is going to turn for the worse, too. Xie rubbed his forehead, mentally taking note that from now on, he would have to be more mindful when eating, drinking, and walking. Sunlung, however, didn't think it was too big of a deal. Don't worry. Pei Ming is too proud. He won't do anything underhanded. Nanfeng gave him a look. What about the Windmaster? Xie asked. She told me not to get involved, meaning she's the one who will file the complaint. In that case, wouldn't she be the one offending General Pei? I can't have that. Let's call her back. Nanfeng, do you know the password to her personal communication array? You don't need to worry about the Windmaster, Nanfeng said. General Pei can't hurt you, but he won't touch her. She may be younger than you, but she's more successful in the heavens. Xie was shocked into silence, but instead he was thinking, who in the heavens is more of a failure than me? I don't think there's anyone. Sunlung laughed. With that backing, of course she's successful. Are you talking... Oh, one person. Are you talking about the lady in black? She looks to be a strong character, too, Xie remarked. No, Sunlung replied, but she must also be one of the 5 elemental masters that make up wind, water, rain, earth, and thunder. I recommend not offending her. The Windmaster could start a twister from nowhere, which was obviously powerful, but the lady in black was stronger. Xie kept thinking that the lady had noticed something in Sunlung and felt rather concerned. I agree. Still, there were words that Xie thought didn't need to be said, so he swallowed them. He thought, even someone with a strong backing may not be successful. Back in the day, the Crown Prince of Sienna had the support of the Heavenly Emperor, who ruled all 3 realms for 1,000 years, and he was still a failure. Xie picked up his fallen bamboo hat, dusted it off, and sighed in relief upon seeing it wasn't flattened. He tied it back round his neck and looked at Nanfeng. Weren't you pursued and beaten up by those 2 ladies the whole time? Oh, you weren't pursued and beaten up by those 2 ladies the whole time, were you? Yes, we thought the whole time, Nanfeng replied, face dark. Xie patted his shoulder. Thanks for your hard work. Suddenly he remembered another hard worker and also turned around. Where's Fu Yao? Wasn't he watching the bitten man? Nanfeng responded. Xie didn't recall seeing Fu Yao after getting blown out of the sinner's pit. Actually, ever since Aziao revealed himself, there had been no sight of him. If he didn't leave, then he must have left when the wind blew? Xie wasn't actually that worried. He figured Fu Yao didn't want to get mixed up in this mess, so he ran off. But having heard Nanfeng say bitten, he snapped out of it, and they both cried at the same time. The Xiang fern! The sky is only just lightening. No rush. However, there was no such thing as no rush when it came to saving lives. Even if they were far from the 24-hour deadline, who knew if that anything had happened all this time? Xie had no time to think about Fu Yao. He hurriedly lifted Bai Yue onto his back and ran toward the palace grounds. Once at the palace, Xie laid Bai Yue down and immediately picked a few large bundles of the Xiang fern. The mud face was still on the ground, its face a bloody mess among its white bones. In the past, Xie would have buried it. But first of all, he was in a hurry to save people, and second, the man had been buried in the ground for 50 or 60 years. He must not want to go back. But the corpse of the dead merchant was missing, and Xie stopped, puzzled. Just then, Sunlung emerged from the palace with a small clay pot. When Xie saw, he immediately called out, "Ah, good, Sunlung, thank you." Bai Yue was weak, and they couldn't rouse her. So Xie shrank her and tucked her into the pot. With the ferns collected, the group rushed back. It had been about 8 hours since they left. Returning to where Fuyao had drawn the circle, Xielian thought that many were still sitting properly within, too scared to venture out. The old man who had taken Nanfeng's pill was doing all right, and after applying the herb to his wound and having him eat the plant, he was able to stand and walk after resting for a while. Xielian didn't think there was any need to tell them what the herb used to grow on. After some time, the merchants settled down, and they began to worry. Where's Tian? Why haven't the others returned yet? Xielian had been too busy picking herbs to find him earlier, plus there was not a single Baiyue soldier left in the ruins, so he hadn't bothered with Tianxiang and the others. He was just thinking about going back to search for them when he heard the voice of a boy yelling as he ran closer and closer. Xielian turned his head, and sure enough, it was Tianxiang. The boy had a large bundle of the Xiangyue fern in his arms, and behind him there were 2 other merchants, all huffing and puffing. Xielian asked them what happened, and he learned that while on top of the walls of the Sinner's Pit, Baiyue swept the soldiers down and captured Tianxiang and the merchants. They were terrified, but Baiyue only led them down the pit and directed them where to go before sending them on their way. They escaped, picked the herbs, and buried the dead merchant's body, and rushed back as fast as they could, yet were still slower than Xielian. In any case, Xielian escorted the caravan out of the Gobi Desert and ended this journey at last. Before they bid farewell, Tianxiang snuck out to find him and whispered mysteriously, Gaga, I have a question for you. Ask away, Xielian said. You're actually a god, aren't you? Xielian was astonished, but also a little touched. In the past, there was a time he'd holler and announce to the world, I am a god, I am the crown prince, his royal highness, and no one would believe him. This time he hadn't even said anything, and the other party asked if he was a god. It made him both astonished and moved. Tianxiang added immediately, I saw you use spells. Don't worry, I won't tell. How would you even tell? No one would believe you, Xielian thought. Tianxiang continued, If not for you, I would have gotten thrown into the pit by a bunch of ugly ghost soldiers. When I get home, I'll build you a temple and worship you. Xielian watched him pat his chest and make a very big hand gesture, and couldn't help but let out a laugh. He smiled. And thank you. Sunlung was standing to the side and chuckled lightly for some unknown reason. Xielian didn't think it was because he thought the child's naive words were ridiculous. Although the children had no idea just how much work went into the constructing of a temple, receiving such a promise, whether it would be fulfilled or not, was nevertheless a happy occasion. After much hassling, he made up a random title, the Scrap Immortal, to leave behind. Then he waved and walked off in the opposite direction. Nanfeng drew another teleportation array and sent them all back to Puzi's shrine. Opening the door, Xielian took the straw mat out, laid it open on the ground, and collapsed on it like a dead body. This was all done in one breath. Sunlung sat down next to him and watched him, hand propping up his chin. Xielian sighed. How long were we gone? About 3 or 4 days, Sunlung replied. Xielian sighed again. Only 3 or 4 days. Why am I so tired? Ever since he ascended, he was worked to the bone like a dog, no lie. After he was done sighing, Xielian looked up. Nanfeng, why haven't you gone to report back yet? Report back where? Nanfeng asked. Aren't you an official of Nanyang Palace? Won't your general miss you after 3 or 4 days? My general isn't at the palace right now, so he won't miss me, Nanfeng replied. Xielian rolled over and got up. All right, it'll be good too, if you stay. What are you doing? Nanfeng asked. Xielian looked at him cheerfully. I'm going to cook you a meal, as a reward for your hard work. Nanfeng's face dropped drastically. He raised a hand, pressing 2 fingers together, and touched his temple, as if receiving someone's private communication. He got up and turned. There's an emergency at my palace. I'll see you later. Xiaolian raised his hand. What? Nanfeng, don't go. How can there suddenly be an emergency? I really want to thank you for everything. There's an emergency! Nanfeng roared and ran out the door. Xiaolian sat back down on the mat and looked at Sanlang. Guess he's not hungry. There was a loud sound before Sanlang could reply. It was Nanfeng who'd run back, blocking the doorway. You two! You two! Xiaolian and Sanlang were sitting together on the mat, and they both looked up at him. What about us two? Nanfeng pointed his finger at Sanlang, then at Xiaolian. His words stuck in his throat, unable to speak. And finally, I'll be back. You're welcome any time, Xiaolian said. Nanfeng gave Sanlang one last stink eye before closing the door and leaving. Xiaolian crossed his arms and tilted his head like Sanlang's and said, Looks like there really is an emergency. He turned to look at the youth next to him and smiled cheerfully. He's not hungry. How about you? Sanlang smiled cheerfully back. I'm starving. Xiaolian grinned and stood up again, before turning around and casually tidying the altar table. All right then. What do you want to eat? Huachang? Behind him there was silence. Then chuckling. I still prefer the name Sanlang.